I moved off-grid for the kind of peace you can't buy. No neighbors. No traffic. No city noise leaking through the walls at night. Just trees, wind, and a small cabin I built with my own hands on a slice of land I'd saved up for years to afford. It was the kind of place where your phone turned into a brick the moment you stepped out of the truck. No signal. No internet. No easy way to call for help. That wasn't a downside to me. That was the point. I was 32 at the time. Burnout. Angry all the time. Tired of feeling like my life was just working, commuting, sleeping, repeating. So I bought a small plot about an hour and a half from the nearest town, deep enough that the road stopped being paved halfway in, and every rainfall turned the rest into mud. The first month was perfect. My days were simple. Wake up early. Chop wood. Haul water. Fix whatever needed fixing. At night, I'd sit on the porch with a lantern and listen to the forest. And the forest listened back. You notice things when there's nothing else to distract you. Little cracks in branches. Distant animal calls. The way sound travels weirdly at night, like it's sliding over the ground. I had a rifle. Not because I expected trouble, but because living out there means you prepare. Coyotes, maybe a bear if you're unlucky. That kind of thing. It wasn't until the 5th week that I started noticing signs. At first, it was small. I'd wake up and find footprints in the dirt near my woodpile. Not animal footprints. Boot prints. I told myself it could have been mine from the night before. Maybe I'd walked around half asleep. Maybe I'd stepped out to take a leak and forgot. But I started paying attention. The prints appeared again 2 nights later. Different angle this time. Coming from the trees. I walked the edge of my clearing and stared into the tree line. It was thick out there. Pines and tall brush. Shadows that didn't move even when the wind did. I called out, mostly as a warning. Hello? No answer. The forest just swallowed my voice like it didn't matter. That night, I made sure my doors were locked. I put a chair under the handle, even though the lock was solid. And I slept with the rifle beside the bed. Somewhere close to midnight, I heard something. A soft, steady crunch. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Slow footsteps in dry leaves. I sat up instantly, heart hammering. My cabin was quiet except for the faint sound of the stove settling and the wind outside. Then I heard it again. This time closer. Crunch, crunch. Like someone walking around the cabin. I froze, listening so hard my ears almost hurt. Then, nothing. No footsteps. No voice. No knock. Just silence. The next morning, I checked outside. Fresh boot prints circled the cabin. Not mine. There was something else too. A mark on one of the window frames. A long scrape, like a fingernail dragged through the dust and old paint. I stood there staring at it, feeling my stomach tighten. That's when I started thinking of leaving. But people don't move off-grid because they're good at quitting. We do it because we're stubborn. Because we want to prove we can. So I told myself it was probably a hunter. Maybe someone passing through, curious. I decided to make it clear I wasn't alone out there. That afternoon, I nailed a rough sign to a post near the path leading into my clearing. Private property. No trespassing. I even added, "You are on camera." I didn't have cameras. But I figured the line might keep someone away. For 2 nights after that, everything was quiet. No footprints. No midnight crunching. I relaxed, And that's when it got worse. On the third night, I woke up to a sound that didn't belong. A tapping. Soft at first. Tap, tap, tap. It was coming from the window beside my bed. My eyes snapped open, and I stared at the dark glass. The tapping paused. Then came again. Tap, tap, tap. Slow. Patient. My mouth went dry. I reached for the rifle without taking my eyes off the window. The tapping stopped. And then, as if whoever was out there leaned closer, I heard breathing. Right against the glass. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just a calm, steady exhale, like someone standing inches away, enjoying the fact that I was awake. I couldn't move. I couldn't even swallow. A voice whispered from the other side of the window, so quiet it almost blended into the night. I know you're in there. My skin went cold. The voice didn't sound angry. It sounded amused. Like this was a game. I forced myself to move, inching the rifle up, aiming at the window. The barrel shook. I couldn't stop it. My voice came out rough. Get off my land. Silence. Then the breathing again. And then, the tapping moved. Tap, tap, tap. Not on the window anymore. On the wall. Like whoever it was had started walking along the outside of the cabin, dragging their fingers across the wood as they went. Tap, tap, tap. I listened as it traveled toward the front door. And stopped. Right at the door. There was a long pause. And then the doorknob turned. Slowly. Just a little. Testing it. The chair under the handle held firm. I aimed at the door, finger tight on the trigger. Then I heard a sound I still can't forget. A soft chuckle. Right on the other side. And then footsteps backing away, crunching through leaves. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Disappearing into the trees like it was nothing. I didn't sleep after that. I sat in the dark with the rifle, waiting for it to come back, waiting for the door to shake again. Morning came, and I stepped out carefully. There were boot prints everywhere. But the worst part was the front door. Something had been carved into it. Not deep, but enough to leave pale lines in the wood. A simple message. Stay inside tonight. I stood there with my breath stuck in my throat. It wasn't a warning. It was an order. I drove into town that day for supplies and to clear my head. I didn't tell anyone. It felt embarrassing, like I'd admit I couldn't handle what I signed up for. I told myself I'd stay one more night, and if anything happened again, I'd leave for good. That night I prepared. I loaded the rifle. I kept my lantern off so the cabin looked empty. I sat in the corner where I could see the door and the window without being silhouetted. Hours passed. Nothing. Then, around 2 a.m., I heard it. Not footsteps. Not tapping. A different sound. A slow creak, creak, creak. Like something moving high up. I stared toward the ceiling. Then I realized it wasn't inside. It was outside. Above me. I crept to the window and lifted the curtain by an inch. The moonlight was just enough to see the roofline. And a shape. A person, crouched on my roof. Still as a statue. Facing the tree line. Like they were waiting for something. Or someone. My blood turned to ice. Then the figure's head tilted slightly, almost like it heard my movement. I dropped the curtain. My heart pounded so hard I thought I'd pass out. I backed away, rifle raised. The cabin was silent again for a moment. Then I heard it. A scratch. right above the window, like nails dragging across the roof. Slowly, back and forth. Then a whisper, muffled through the wood. "Come out!" I didn't respond. I couldn't. The whisper came again. "Come out, so I can see you." The scratching intensified, like the person was crawling along the roof, searching for the best spot. Then I heard a heavy thump. They dropped down, right outside the front door. A shadow passed beneath the crack at the bottom. Someone was standing there. And then they knocked. Not hard. Just once. A gentle, polite knock. Like a neighbor asking for sugar. My grip tightened. Then the voice spoke again, clearer this time. "I brought you something." I stayed silent. A soft sound followed, like something being placed on the porch. Then footsteps moved away. Crunch, crunch, and vanished. I didn't move for a full 10 minutes. Finally, I forced myself to approach the door and peek through the small crack in the curtain near the window. On my porch was a pile. At first I didn't understand what I was looking at. Then it hit me. It was my own sign. The one I nailed up. Private property. No trespassing. You are on camera. It had been ripped off the post and carried here. And on the back, written in thick black marker. I am too. I left that morning. I didn't pack much. Just essentials and my tools. I drove straight to the nearest sheriff's office and told them everything. They looked at me like I was exaggerating, but they agreed to send a deputy out later that week. When I went back with the deputy 2 days later, the cabin looked wrong. The door was open. The deputy raised an eyebrow and put his hand on his holster. I knew I had locked it. I knew I had braced it. But it stood open like it had never been shut. Inside, nothing was stolen. Nothing broken. It was almost worse. Because someone had been there. My bed was neatly made. My lantern sat in the center of the floor. And on the table was a single photograph. A printed photo. Of me. Standing on my porch at night. Holding my rifle. Looking out into the trees. The deputy stared at it, face tight. I couldn't speak. The photo hadn't been taken from inside. It was taken from the tree line. From someone hiding out there, watching me. The deputy asked quietly, "When was this taken?" I swallowed hard. 2 nights ago. He looked around the cabin, then back at me. "We're leaving." We left. They never found anyone. No fingerprints. No tracks worth following. Nothing. I sold the land within the month. Sometimes I still think about that photo. Not just that someone took it, but the angle. The height. Whoever took it wasn't standing. They were crouched. Low. Like they'd been there the whole time. Just waiting for me to step outside like I'd been told. When my cousin Darren asked me to help him move off-grid, I honestly thought it was a phase. He'd been obsessed with survival videos and escaping the system for years, but this time he actually bought land, deep woods, old hunting trails, no nearby houses. He found a rundown cabin already on the property. He said it was perfect. I told him it was a bad idea. He laughed and said I could come visit any time. So I did. The first time I visited, it looked normal in a rough way. The cabin was old, logs stacked unevenly, roof patched in places. Inside smelled like dust, wood smoke, and something faintly sour, like wet insulation. Darren was happy, though. He showed me his water barrels, his solar setup, his little wood stove. It was simple. Quiet. But something bothered me immediately. There was no road right up to the cabin. You had to park near a clearing and hike 15 minutes in. And yet, the door had a modern deadbolt. Not old. Not rusty. Brand new. I pointed it out. Darren's smile faded for a second. Yeah, he said. It was here when I found the place. That doesn't make sense, I told him. The cabin looks like it's been sitting untouched for decades. He shrugged like he didn't want to think about it. That night, we sat outside with a small fire and talked until it got cold. Then the forest changed. You know how the woods have a normal nighttime sound? Bugs, wind, maybe an owl. At some point, all of it stopped. Like someone hit a mute button. Darren noticed it too. He stopped mid-sentence and stared into the darkness. What? I asked. He didn't answer right away. Then he whispered, Do you hear that? I listened. At first, nothing. Then, faintly, from somewhere beyond the tree line, a knocking sound. Knock, knock, knock. 3 slow knocks. Not loud. Not close. But steady. I frowned. That's a woodpecker or something. Darren shook his head. No. The knocking came again. Knock, knock, knock. Same rhythm. 3. Then silence. Darren stood up and threw dirt on the fire. What are you doing? I asked. He looked tense. We go inside when it does that. Why? He hesitated. Then said, Just trust me. Inside the cabin, Darren locked the deadbolt, then added an old chain latch he'd installed. I laughed, trying to keep it light. You're acting like something's out there. Darren didn't laugh back. He turned off the lantern and sat in the dark. For a while, nothing happened. Then, right at the door. Knock, knock, knock. 3 knocks. This time, close enough that I felt it in my chest. My stomach dropped. Darren leaned toward me and whispered, Don't answer. I whispered back, Who is that? He shook his head slowly. The knocks came again. Knock, knock, knock. Then a pause. Then a voice. Not loud. Not angry. Just flat. Let me in. I froze. The voice sounded like a man, but not quite right. Like the words were being copied from memory. Darren's face was pale in the faint moonlight slipping through the cracks. The voice came again. Let me in. I mouthed to Darren, Call the police. He gave a tiny shake of his head. No signal. Right. The knock stopped. A long silence followed. Then footsteps. Slow steps around the cabin. The sound of leaves compressing under weight. A scrape along the wall, like fingertips dragging. Darren kept staring straight ahead, not blinking. The footsteps stopped at the window. I held my breath. The voice whispered from outside, closer now. I can hear you. I felt my skin prickle. I hadn't made a sound. Neither had Darren. So how? Then the voice said something that made my blood run cold. It said my name. Softly. Perfectly. Evan. I stared at Darren. My mouth opened but no words came out. Darren's eyes widened like he couldn't believe it either. The voice repeated it. Evan. Then, quieter. Open the door. I backed away from the window. Darren grabbed my arm hard, like don't move. Minutes passed. The footsteps eventually faded. Silence returned. But we didn't sleep. At sunrise, Darren acted like it never happened. He made coffee. He joked. He changed the subject every time I brought it up. Before I left, I asked him straight up, "How long has that been happening?" His smile slipped. "Since the first week," he admitted. "It knocks at night sometimes. Always 3. And it talks?" He nodded. "Why haven't you left?" I asked. He looked down. "Because it wasn't always like this." I frowned. "What do you mean?" Darren swallowed. He said, "The cabin answers back." I stared at him. "What?" He hesitated, then spoke like he was ashamed. "Sometimes, when it knocks, if you knock back." He shook his head. "The cabin knocks from the inside." My stomach turned. "That's impossible." He looked at me seriously. "I know. But it happens." I left fast. Over the next month, Darren got stranger on the phone when he drove into town to get service. He'd call me from his truck, voice low, like someone might hear. He told me things he didn't tell anyone else. He said the knocking had started happening in daylight too. He said sometimes he'd wake up and find muddy footprints inside the cabin. Bare footprints. But the door would still be locked from the inside. He said he started hearing whispers when he was alone, like someone talking just out of hearing range, trying to make him lean in closer. Then one day, he called me and sounded excited. Not scared. Excited. "It spoke to me," he said. My heart sank. "Darren, don't." "It said it knows what I want," he whispered. "It said it can keep me safe out here." I felt sick. "Safe from what?" There was a pause. Then Darren said, "From people." A week later, I drove out there. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I arrived in the clearing and hiked the trail to the cabin. It was quiet. Too quiet. When the cabin came into view, I felt a cold dread settle over me. The front door was wide open. I rushed up and called Darren's name. No answer. Inside, the cabin smelled worse than before. A damp, sour smell, like rot. The place looked lived in, but not by Darren. The furniture had been moved. The table was pushed against the wall. The window curtains were gone. And the walls were covered in marks. Scratches. Hundreds of them. Like something had dragged nails down the logs over and over. In the center of the floor was Darren's deadbolt. Broken clean off the door. I found his phone on the table, powered off. Then I saw something in the corner, something hanging. It took my brain a second to process. A bundle of clothes. Darren's clothes. Folded neatly. Boots lined up beneath them. Like someone had undressed him and put everything away carefully. I backed out, panic rising. That's when I heard it. 3 knocks. From inside the cabin. Knock, knock, knock. I froze on the porch. The cabin was empty. I had just been inside. But the knocking came again. Knock, knock, knock. Then a voice drifted out through the open doorway. Darren's voice. Not muffled. Not far. Right there. "Evan?" it called. My throat tightened. I didn't answer. The voice repeated, a little more urgent. "Evan, come in. I'm here." I took a step back, shaking. That wasn't Darren. It sounded like him, but too clean, too perfect, like an impression. Then the voice dropped lower. And it said, "Let me in." The same words as before. I ran. I didn't stop running until I reached my truck. I drove straight to town and went to the police. They came out with me. They searched the area for hours. They found no Darren. But they did find something else. Behind the cabin, half hidden by brush, was a shallow pit. Inside were old bones. Animal bones, and bones that didn't look like animals. The sheriff told me they'd investigate, but I could tell by his face he didn't want to stay out there. Before we left, I looked back at the cabin. And I swear, I saw someone standing in the window. Watching. Smiling. Wearing Darren's face like it belonged to them. Living off-grid means you get used to being cut off. No phone. No internet. No easy news updates. Just you, your land, and whatever you brought with you. For me, that whatever included an old battery-powered radio. I didn't even use it much. Mostly for weather updates, sometimes music if I got lucky. My cabin sat near a wide stretch of woods in northern Maine. It was isolated enough that at night, the darkness felt thick, like a solid thing. And when winter came, isolation didn't just feel peaceful. It felt dangerous. One night, after a heavy snow, the wind started howling hard enough to shake the window frames. I lit my lantern and turned on the radio for weather. Static. I turned the knob, searching. More static. Then, briefly, a station cut through, music, then lost again. I kept turning. And that's when I heard a voice. Not like a radio host. Not like music. A voice, low and calm, as if someone was speaking very close to the microphone. Can you hear me? I froze, hands still on the dial. The voice came again. I know you can hear me. My skin went cold. I checked the frequency. It wasn't a normal station. It was sitting between stations, where you usually only get static. I leaned closer, stupidly, like that would make it clearer. The voice continued. You're alone. I stared at the radio, heart thudding. It wasn't crackly like radio voices are. It sounded near. Like it was inside the cabin. I snapped the radio off. The silence that followed felt too big. I waited. Nothing. So I told myself I imagined it. Wind, fatigue, the mind playing tricks. I went to bed. Sometime after midnight, I woke up to a faint sound. A soft hiss. Like static. I sat up and looked around. The radio was on. I knew I turned it off. I hadn't touched it. The dial glowed faintly. Static filled the cabin. Then, slowly, a voice emerged from the noise. Don't go back to sleep. My mouth went dry. I reached out and turned it off again. This time I pulled the batteries out and set them on the table. Then I lay back down, staring at the ceiling until morning. The next day, I drove into the nearest town, more rattled than I wanted to admit. I bought new batteries, checked the radio, even asked the guy at the counter if weird transmissions were common out there. He laughed and said, "You'll mostly get weather and country music." That night, I put the radio in a drawer. No batteries. Just to be safe. Around 1 a.m., the knocking started. Not on the door. On the wall beside my bed. 3 knocks. Knock, knock, knock. I sat up so fast my neck hurt. The knocking came again. Same rhythm. 3. I held my breath. Then, from inside the drawer across the room. Static. A faint crackle like a distant storm. The drawer began to vibrate slightly, like something inside was alive. Then a voice pushed through the static, muffled but clear enough. "I told you I can reach you." I couldn't move. I stared at the drawer like it might explode. The voice continued, slow and calm. "You don't like being alone as much as you think." I grabbed my flashlight and crossed the room, hands trembling. I yanked the drawer open. The radio sat there. Dark. No batteries. Yet static hissed from its speaker like it was fully powered. I slammed the drawer shut. The voice didn't stop. It spoke through the wood. "Open it." I backed away. "Open it," it repeated, firmer. Then softer, like it was trying to be kind. "I can keep you company." I grabbed the drawer handle again and pulled it open, more out of panic than choice. The static surged, then cleared. And what I heard next still makes my stomach drop when I think about it. I heard my own voice. Recorded. Speaking words I didn't remember saying. "I'm scared," my voice said from the radio. I stared, shaking. The radio replied in that calm voice. "You should be." My recorded voice played again, like a conversation loop. "I think someone is outside," the calm voice answered. "Someone is always outside." I slammed the drawer shut again and stumbled back toward the bed. The knocking on the wall stopped. The cabin went dead silent. Then, from somewhere outside through the storm wind, I heard footsteps in the snow. Slow. Heavy. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Circling the cabin. I grabbed my rifle and aimed at the door, trying to breathe quietly. The footsteps stopped at the front porch. Then there was a soft scrape, like something being placed against the door. The radio crackled again from inside the drawer. And the calm voice said, "Look." I didn't want to. But I inched toward the window and peeked out. Something was standing on my porch. A shape wrapped in a heavy coat. Its head tilted slightly toward the window like it knew exactly where I was. The porch light didn't work, so I couldn't see its face. But I could see what it was holding. A radio. Another one. Bigger. Old-fashioned. Like something from decades ago. The figure raised it slowly and turned a knob. And my cabin radio responded instantly from inside the drawer. Static linked them like a wire. The calm voice came through, stronger now. "Do you understand?" I whispered, barely audible. "What do you want?" The figure on the porch didn't move. But the voice answered immediately, like it heard me anyway. "I want you to invite me in." My throat tightened. The voice continued. "You already let me in once. When you listened." The figure took one slow step closer to the door. The doorknob turned slightly, testing. My rifle shook. I yelled, "Go away!" The figure stopped. Then the calm voice sighed through the radio, almost disappointed. "You'll invite me eventually." The figure backed away into the snow. Footsteps faded. I didn't sleep. I sat with the rifle until morning. At sunrise, I opened the drawer and stared at the radio. It was silent. I threw it into a metal bucket and carried it outside to my burn pit. I smashed it with an axe until the plastic cracked and the speaker broke apart. No sound. No static. I felt relief for the first time in hours. Then, from inside the broken radio, a faint hiss. Static. My blood went cold. The calm voice whispered, barely audible, "You can't break a door once it's open." I dropped the axe and stumbled back. That winter, I left the cabin and never returned. But here's the part that makes me feel sick. Months later, back in the city, I was cleaning out my storage. I found the old batteries I'd taken out that first night. I'd tossed them in a box and forgotten. Out of curiosity, I put them into a different radio I owned. A normal one. In an apartment building surrounded by people. Static filled the speaker for a second. Then the calm voice said clearly, "Can you hear me? Which story scared you the most?" Comment below and subscribe for more true horror stories.